The stars were silent when the message went out. It was a last hope, wrapped in desperation, fired into the void by trembling hands. The Valkyrie High Council, once peaceful keepers of art, science, and diplomacy, had never sent such a message. Before, they were not warriors. They had no great weapons, no fleets, and no history of conquest. Their strength had always been in cooperation. But the Skarn did not speak the language of peace. Hive-born and relentless, the Skarn swept across the outer rim with cold precision. Worlds fell without warning. Colonies vanished in hours. Tire. Species went into hiding or surrendered quietly, hoping to be spared. The Concord Council convened emergency sessions but took no action. Diplomats debated, but none dared challenge the swarm. And so the Valkyrie sent a single message to the far edge of known space. A forgotten system, long unvisited. It was marked in old archives with a cautionary note. Class 5 Death World, inhospitable. Avoid contact. That world was called Earth. Admiral Sabine Holt sat at the edge of the briefing room table, arms crossed, brow furrowed. On the wall screen, the transmission played in a slow, melodic language accompanied by visual translations. Please, we seek help. Not conquest, not control. Only survival. The words were simple. The voice behind them wavered. The speaker's eyes, large and amber-colored, blinked. Slowly, as if expecting no answer at all. The room remained quiet after the message ended. Around the table sat officials from every major power on Earth: United Governance, the Pacific Coalition, Orbital Command, even representatives from the Mars Confederacy. No one spoke for several seconds. Thoughts? Asked Director Yuntak, folding his hands. It's a trap, one general said flatly. Why ask us? Why Earth? I guess. Everyone else said no. Admiral Holt replied. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Or worse, they're too afraid to respond. She stood and walked toward the screen. The alien figure looped again, its plea echoing in the background. I've seen that look before. Refugees, displaced families. That's not a trick. It's someone watching everything they love fall apart. Another official leaned forward. Admiral, if this Skarn threat is real, we could be dragging Earth into another galactic conflict. Our people are tired. We've only just rebuilt from the last one. We are tired, she agreed. But that doesn't mean we stop doing what's right. The debate went on for hours, but momentum shifted. Humanity had spent centuries carving out its place in the stars. From the fractured nations of the 21st century to the united presence of Earth in the 24th. It had always been one thing: resilient. In the end, it wasn't politics that decided. It was the memory of what humanity had survived. They knew too. Well, what it felt like to be alone, to fight with nothing left but hope. The decision was made. From high above Earth, the fleet began to form. Not a full invasion force at least not yet, but enough. A task force of destroyers, carriers, and support vessels. Alongside them flew the Nightwing stealth cruisers designed for deep strike operations and the Valkyries, elite marine dropships. The mission was designated Operation Emberlight. Its purpose was clear: reach the Valkyrie, assess the threat, and stabilize the region. Admiral Holt took command personally. As she stood aboard the flagship Resolute, watching Earth shrink in the distance, she spoke quietly to herself. They asked for help, so we'll give it. She paused, then added, let's show them what humanity does when someone needs saving. Across the stars, the Valkyrie wait, frightened, unsure, and fading. They had cried out into the dark, hoping for mercy. What they got instead was humanity, and humanity was coming. The room was charged with tension as Earth's leaders gathered. Once more, the images of Valkyrie worlds falling, of peaceful cities reduced to rubble. filled the large holographic display hovering above the council chamber. Around the table sat politicians, scientists, military officers, and diplomats, each carrying the weight of the decision on their shoulders. "Why us?" asked Ambassador Leora Chen, her voice steady but edged with disbelief. "The Galactic Concord has remained neutral for too long. Why should Earth intervene now? We risk everything, our resources, our people on a distant conflict where we have no allies." Director Yoon Tak, representing Earth's combined defense, shook his head. "Because no one else will. Because if we don't, the Skarn will continue their expansion unchecked. And sooner or later, they'll come here." An uncomfortable silence followed. Omea One wanted to admit that Earth was vulnerable. But it was true. Admiral Sabine Holt stood to address the assembly. Her presence commanded respect. Years of service and leadership were evident in her steady gaze and calm voice. "We are not just soldiers. We are the descendants of survivors, of those who faced impossible odds and refused to yield. The Valkyrie did not choose us randomly. They sent their call to the only species recorded to have endured Deathworld conditions and emerged stronger." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We have fought in wars that tested us to the core. We have rebuilt from ruin time and again. Our strength is not just in our weapons, but in our will to fight for others." Some faces around the table softened. Others remained doubtful. A scientist named Dr. Elias Rourke spoke up next. "The Valkyrie are peaceful by nature. We must consider the ethical implications of introducing warfare to their culture. Are we prepared to change an entire civilization?" Admiral Holt nodded. "They have already been changed against their will. We are not here to conquer or control. We are here to protect, to teach them to stand for themselves." A young senator from the Pacific Coalition leaned forward. "If we send forces, what happens when we face the Skarn ourselves? This enemy is unlike any we have encountered. It's not just a military threat, it's a biological and psychological one." Holt met his gaze directly. "Then we prepare. We learn. We fight. We show the galaxy that humanity does not back down. We may not have the numbers or the advanced technology of some other species, but we have resilience, creativity, and heart." After hours of debate, votes were cast. The majority supported sending a task force, though under strict rules of engagement and oversight. It was a risk, perhaps the greatest since humanity first reached for the stars. But it was also a chance. As the decision was finalized, Admiral Holt returned to her command center aboard the Resolute. Her officers gathered, awaiting orders. "Prepare for departure," she said. "We leave in 72 hours. This is not just a mission, it is a promise. To the Valkyrie and to ourselves." Her voice held a rare note of warmth, tempered with steel. "We go as guardians. We go as warriors. We go as humans." On Earth, across cities and settlements, people watched the news with a mix of hope and anxiety. Some feared a war they could not fully understand. Others felt pride that their world, scarred and battered, might finally take its place among the stars as protectors, not just survivors. Meanwhile, light years away, the Valkyrie received word of Earth's decision. Their leaders gathered in the shattered remains of their capital city, the sky dimmed by smoke and ash. The Velnori Elder, a wise and gentle being named Ilrath, addressed his people. "Earth answers our call. The Deathworlders come. We do not know what that means for us yet, but we will watch. And when they arrive, we will stand with open hearts and open eyes." Far beyond the Valkyrie home system, the Skarn hive buzzed with activity. Unknown to the galaxy, the Skarn queen pulsed her thoughts like dark waves through the hive network. "They come," she said, a promise filled with malice, "and we will greet them with fire." Admiral Holt looked out the viewport at the stars ahead. The journey had begun, and humanity was ready. The moment the human fleet slipped through the Valnori system's outer defenses, everything changed. The quiet desperation that had hung over the fractured worlds lifted, replaced by a fierce and cautious hope. The Valnori, once resigned to extinction, now had a Legion predictable, relentless, and ready to fight. Admiral Sabine Holt stood on the bridge of the flagship Resolute, watching the tactical displays flicker with incoming reports. Sensors picked up Skarn warships closing on a Valnori outpost on the planet Cathrafor. It was under siege, with evacuation routes cut off and defenses failing. Status? Holt asked. Skarn fleet approaching at high speed, replied Lieutenant. Moya, they're expecting us, but they don't know our tactics. Holt nodded grimly. Prepare to deploy Marine squads and Valkyrie dropships. We hold Kethra. Human soldiers aboard the Resolute checked their gear and weapons with practiced precision. The Marines called the Deathworlders soldiers born from a planet where danger was a constant. Their reputation was infamous across the galaxy, but none had seen them in action before. For the Valnori watching from below, this was their first glimpse of humanity's true nature. The drop began with brutal efficiency. Valkyrie dropships roared through the atmosphere, weaving through enemy fire to deliver Marines right into the heart of the battle. The Skarn warships fired relentlessly, but human fighters, small and fast, darted between beams, striking with pulse lasers and missiles. On the ground, the Marines moved like a single living machine covering each other, advancing under fire, pulling wounded comrades to safety. In one ruined street, a human squad leader named Corporal Dax Martinez shouted orders, rallying his team as they pushed back the enemy. Hold this position. Protect the evac zone. We're not leaving anyone behind. The Valnori militia watched from cover, amazed by the humans' tenacity. Unlike their own forces, who hesitated at the first sign of danger, the Deathworlders pressed forward with fearless determination. One Valnori, Commander Ilmer observed quietly. They fight not just with weapons, but with something more. A fire we have never known. When a Valnori child was trapped in a collapsing building, a human Marine risked everything to reach her, shielding her with his own body as the debris fell. For Ilmer, it was the moment everything changed. By the time the battle ended, the Skarn forces were in retreat. The outpost remained in human and Valnori hands, battered but unbroken. The galaxy watched as the Valnori slowly began to rise from the ashes, not as victims, but as fighters. But the humans did not stop at victory. Admiral Holt summoned her officers for a briefing. We have won this battle, she said, but the war is far from over. We must teach the Valnori to stand for themselves. We cannot fight their battles forever. Plans were made to train Valnori volunteers, share tactics, and adapt human technology to their unique needs. Meanwhile, whispers spread through the Galactic Concord. Some officials admired humanity's boldness, calling it a necessary awakening. Others feared it a reminder that Earth's unpredictable spirit might upset the delicate balance of power. But the Valnori did not care for politics. They only knew that in humanity they had found an ally unlike any other. Back aboard the Resolute, Admiral Holt stared at a small holly-midge of the rescued Valnori child. We fight for them, she said quietly, because one day they will fight for themselves. And with that, the Deathworlders prepared for the battles still to come. The morning light filtered through the high windows of the Valnori training grounds, casting long shadows over the dust-choked field, where once peaceful gardens had flourished. Now stood makeshift firing ranges, obstacle courses, and tactical simulators. Valnori recruits moved uncertainly, their slender forms awkward in the bulky combat armor loaned by the humans. The weapons were strange heavy rifles with strange attachments, but their human instructors were patient and firm. Remember, said Sergeant Kara Mills, her voice calm but commanding. "It's not just the gear, it's the mindset. You don't just survive by running away. You survive by standing your ground." The Valkyrie, whose culture prized harmony and diplomacy, struggled with the brutal discipline. But under the watchful eyes of human soldiers, they began to change. Commander Ilmer, who had watched the first battle on Kethra 4, now oversaw the training. "Our people must learn more than how to shoot. They must learn how to fight without losing who they are." Days turned into weeks. The training intensified. Marines drilled the Valkyrie in small unit tactics, cover and movement, emergency medical aid, and communication protocols. Virtual simulations pitted recruits against AI-controlled Skarn drones, forcing them to think quickly and work as teams. "Your enemy adapts," Corporal Dax Martinez reminded them during a break. "So must you." Meanwhile, Admiral Holt coordinated with engineers and scientists to modify Earth technology to better suit Valkyrie physiology and culture. They crafted lighter armor, weapons calibrated for their strength, and ships with smoother lines inspired by Valkyrie aesthetics. Despite progress, setbacks came swiftly. A surprise Skarn raid struck a lightly defended Valkyrie moon. The human task force was caught off guard. Several Marines and Valkyrie fighters lost their lives in fierce close-quarters combat. The loss stung deeply at the memorial service. Admiral Holt addressed the gathered soldiers and Valkyrie families. "This war demands sacrifice. We will remember those we've lost not as failures, but as the first step toward victory." Her words resonated, planting a seed of resolve. The Valkyrie looked to the humans not just as warriors, but as symbols of unwavering courage. Tensions within the Galactic Concord grew louder. Several member species questioned Earth's growing influence. A faction known as the Allori openly criticized the humans' aggressive tactics and refusal to fully submit to Concord authority. Earth's involvement risks tearing apart the fragile balance, a diplomat warned in a closed meeting. Their methods are reckless. But Admiral Holt was undeterred. "We didn't come here to ask permission," she said bluntly to her officers. "We came to fight, to protect, and to win." On Kethra 4, Valkyrie recruits completed their first joint operation under human command, a coordinated strike against a Skarn supply depot. Though clumsy at times, their courage and growing skills turned the tide. Commander Ilmer watched with quiet pride. They are not just learning to fight, they are becoming warriors. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Holt stood beside Ilmer, watching the Valkyrie soldiers practicing drills. "The Valkyrie have a strength born from peace," she said. "We bring the fire to forge that strength into something new." Ilmer nodded. "Together, we become more than the sum of our parts." As the sun set, distant stars blinked into view. The war was far from over, but the Deathworlders and the Valkyrie were ready to meet whatever came next with fire, fury, and unbreakable will. The victories on the front lines were undeniable. Valkyrie planets, once trembling beneath the Skarn's shadow, now held ground, buoyed by human determination and training. But far from the battlefields, in the heart of the Galactic Concord, the mood darkened. The grand halls of the Concord Council were filled with heated whispers and wary glances. Not all saw humanity's rise as a blessing. Some feared it as a threat. Ambassador Valkera, representing the proud and ancient Alluri species, stood before the council's gathering, her voice ringing with authority. "Earth's interference has upset the balance. Their so-called fire and fury risks dragging us all into a war that we cannot afford," she warned. "We must restrain them before their recklessness destroys the fragile peace we have maintained for centuries." Across the room, murmurs of agreement echoed. A senior council member from the Enver Dominion, a species known for their strict adherence to protocol, nodded gravely. The humans operate outside our standard procedures. Their refusal to submit to oversight endangers the Concord's unity. But voices rose in opposition to. Ambassador Leora Chen of Earth's delegation stood firm. We did not ask to be guardians of the galaxy, but we answer calls for help when others turn away. Humanity will not cower behind politics while innocent lives are extinguished. Her words struck a chord with many. The memory of the Valinary's plea and humanity's bravery on the battlefield could not be ignored. Meanwhile, tension simmered within the human ranks. Not everyone agreed on the approach to the war. A faction of hardliners advocated for total domination of the Skarn, while others urged caution. Concerned about collateral damage and the future of interspecies relations, Admiral Holt found herself balancing not only battles, but delicate political currents. She convened her officers in the briefing room aboard the Resolute. "We face enemies within and without," she said. "The Skarn are relentless. The Concord is divided. But our mission remains clear. Protect the Valnary and stop the spread of the Skarn. We will fight with honor and resolve." Her words steadied the crew. Back on the front, human Valnary reconnaissance team discovered troubling intelligence. The Skarn were developing a new weapon capable of devastating entire worlds. It was a monstrous superweapon, a flagship the size of a city, armed with planet-killing firepower. The news shocked the Allied commanders. If the Skarn unleashed it, the war could end before it truly began. Admiral Holt quickly ordered a covert strike team to infiltrate the Skarn stronghold and sabotage the weapon before it could be deployed, as the strike team prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. The weight of the galaxy's fate pressed heavily on them. The mission was more than a battle, it was a gamble. If they succeeded, the balance of power could shift. If they failed, countless worlds would fall. Back at the Concord, political infighting reached a boiling point. Some factions began to push for sanctions against Earth, accusing humans of reckless endangerment. Secret negotiations and backdoor deals threatened to fracture alliances just as the war demanded unity. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Holt stared out at the stars, feeling the full weight of her responsibility. The path ahead was treacherous, marked by enemies seen and unseen. But she knew one truth clearly. When humanity answers a call for help, they do not hesitate. They fight, they endure, they overcome, and this war was far from over. The night before the mission, the air aboard the stealth frigate Shadowfire was thick with quiet tension. The strike team gathered in the briefing room, faces lit by the dim glow of holographic schematics. Corporal Dax Martinez studied the target, the massive skate superweapon codenamed the Scourge, a terrifying fusion of biomechanical dread and devastating firepower. It was nestled deep within a high fortress orbiting a dead, scarred planet. "This is not just another battle," Martinez said, voice low but steady. "If we fail, millions die. If we succeed, we ignite a spark of hope." The team nodded. Each had faced death before, but knew this mission demanded more stealth, cunning, and sacrifice. Admiral Holt watched from the Resolute's command deck, fingers tapping rhythmically on the console. "Godspeed, Shadowfire," she whispered. "Bring the fire." The Shadowfire slipped through the Skarn perimeter like a ghost, cloaked by human technology and electronic warfare. It avoided detection as it drifted closer to the fortress. Inside, the fortress was a nightmare. Corridors alive with pulsating organic walls, Skarn warriors patrolling relentlessly, and the eerie hum of the superweapon powering up. Martinez and his team moved like shadows. They avoided patrols, hacked security nodes, and set charges deep in the heart of the Scourge's reactor core. At one point, the silence shattered. A Skarn guard rounded a corner, claws gleaming. "Now," Martinez whispered. A burst of gunfire. A flash of blades, and the guard was down. With the charges set, the team made a desperate dash for the extraction point. Alarms blared, the fortress convulsing with energy as the superweapon began an emergency shutdown sequence. Back on the Resolute, sensors detected the explosion. A fireball blossomed inside the fortress, lighting the darkness like a second sun. Cheers erupted, but Holt's expression remained serious. This is just the beginning. She said news of the strike rippled through the galaxy. The Skarn were shaken. Their unstoppable weapon was gone in the Valkyrie colonies. Hope surged. People looked to the stars, to the Deathworlders who had answered their call with fire and fury. But victory brought new challenges. The Skarn retaliated fiercely. Launching brutal raids on human and Valkyrie outposts. Entire systems faced destruction. Refugees flooded the safe zones, overwhelming relief efforts. On the political front, the Concord's divisions deepened. Some praised Earth's courage and resolve. Others accused humans of escalation and arrogance. Admiral Holt met with Valkyrie. Elder Ilrath in a quiet chamber aboard the Resolute. "We fight together," she said. "But we must remember, our strength lies not only in firepower, but in unity." Ilrath nodded. "The Valkyrie are ready to stand with you, but we must guard our souls. War can consume us if we are not careful." That night, as the stars wheeled overhead, Holt stood on the observation deck. She thought of Earth's long journey from a fragile, divided world to a beacon of hope in a dark galaxy. The spark had become a flame, and that flame would not be extinguished. The Skarn had underestimated humanity's resolve. That much was clear. Months after the destruction of the superweapon, the tide of war shifted decisively. No longer on the defensive, the combined human Valkyrie forces began pushing the invaders back, system by system. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Sabine Holt surveyed the tactical displays. Red Blip's Skarn warships were retreating under a relentless onslaught of human fighters and Valkyrie cruisers. "Report," Holt commanded. Lieutenant Moya, her fingers flying across the console, responded. "The Skarn are pulling back. From the Valerian system, we estimate their fleet strength has been reduced by 30% in the last 2 weeks. A satisfied nod from Holt. "Keep the pressure on. No mercy." The Valerian campaign was a turning point. Skarn forces, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with sheer numbers and terror, now faced coordinated strikes combining human ingenuity and Valkyrie knowledge of their own terrain in the thick jungles of Valerian Prime. Human and Valkyrie soldiers fought side by side. The terrain was brutal, twisting roots, venomous creatures, and unpredictable weather, but the Deathworlders thrived. Corporal Dax Martinez led his squad through a narrow canyon, flanking a Skarn stronghold. The Valkyrie scout beside him, Lyra, moved silently, her senses sharp. "We're close," Lyra whispered. "The Skarn are vulnerable." With a swift signal, the squad launched a coordinated assault, catching the enemy off guard. The battle was fierce, but the combined forces prevailed. Back aboard the Resolute, Admiral Holt received a transmission from Valkyrie Elder Ilrath. "Your courage has rekindled hope among our people," he said. "Oh, the Valkyrie stand ready to reclaim our worlds. Together, we will restore what was lost." But the victory was not without cost. Skarn reprisals grew increasingly savage. Civilian populations were caught in the crossfire. Entire cities were leveled to deny resources to the Allies. On Earth, protests erupted. Some called for withdrawal, fearing the war's expansion and human casualties. Others rallied in support of the mission, proud of humanity's rising role. As defenders of the innocent, Admiral Holt addressed the media, her voice calm and unwavering. "We fight not for conquest, but for survival, for honor, for every life that looks to us for protection." This war will test us. All but humanity will not back down. In the shadowed halls of the Galactic Concord, political tensions reached a breaking point. Several factions proposed sanctions against Earth, accusing humans of reckless escalation. But Earth's allies, Valkyrie and a growing number of sympathetic species, voted to stand firm. The Concord would not fracture today, as the battle for Valerian Prime concluded. A new threat emerged. Reconnaissance reports indicated the Skarn had unleashed a biological weapana, virulent plague designed to wipe out populations and soldiers. Alike, the disease spread quickly, sowing chaos and death. Admiral Holt convened an emergency council aboard the Resolute. "We must contain this plague," she said. "Science, medicine, and discipline will be our weapons as much as rifles and lasers. We fight on every front against enemies outside and within." Teams of human and Valkyrie scientists worked tirelessly, racing against time. In makeshift laboratories, they developed vaccines and treatments, coordinating with field medics to distribute aid. The war was no longer just a clash of weapons. It was a battle for survival, spirit, and hope. Late one night, as the Resolute drifted above a recovering Valkyrie world, Admiral Holt stood once more on the observation deck. She watched as stars sparkled against the velvet blackness. The tide was turning. The spark had become a roaring flame, and humanity's fire was lighting the way forward. The battlefield was a storm of chaos and determination. Valkyrie skies burned red with plasma fire. Skarn dreadnoughts rumbled like thunder as they rained destruction on the Allied fleets below. Yet, amid the carnage, the combined forces of humans and Valkyrie held their ground with unwavering resolve. Admiral Sabine Holt stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her eyes sharp and steady as she coordinated the final push to break the Skarn's grip on the Valkyrie homeworld. All units formed the assault vector Gamma Niner. Target the Hive Core. "We end this today," Holt commanded. The Hive Core was the heart of the Skarn's operation, a monstrous organic fortress pulsing with dark energy. Destroy it, and the Skarn war effort would collapse. Corporal Dax Martinez led the ground assault teams through twisting tunnels filled with alien bioluminescence and lethal traps. The Skarn fought savagely, but the human Valkyrie warriors pressed forward, fire and fury burning in their veins. In the skies above, Valkyrie cruisers and human fighters wove through the debris of shattered warships. Fighter Ace Lieutenant Moya danced through enemy fire, her ship's laser cannons carving deadly paths. "Target locked on the Hive Core," she reported. "Ready to fire." On the bridge, Admiral Holt gave the final order. Fire. A beam of concentrated energy surged from the combined fleet, striking the Hive Core with devastating force. The fortress shuddered, cracks spidering across its surface as it began to collapse. The Skarn Queen's scream echoed through the Hive sound, both terrifying and sorrowful. But the Allied forces did not falter. They pushed deeper, driving the enemy back, reclaiming territory lost to darkness and fear. As the dust settled, a hush fell over the battlefield. The Skarn threat, long looming like a shadow over the galaxy, had been broken. Valkyrie ships saluted the Resolute as it descended toward the planet's surface in the aftermath. Celebrations erupted across the Valkyrie colonies. Humans and Valkyrie alike honored the fallen, the brave who had answered the call with fire and fury. Elder Ilrath spoke at a grand ceremony, his voice steady and proud. "Together, we have reclaimed our future. Humanity showed us what it means to fight with heart and unyielding spirit. We are no longer alone." Back on Earth, messages of gratitude and respect flooded in. The people celebrated the Deathworlders who had dared to step beyond their own struggles to save another species. Admiral Holt addressed the world one final time. "We answered a call, not because it was easy, but because it was right. Humanity's fire burns brightest when we stand united for those who cannot stand alone. The Galactic Concord, though cautious, recognized Earth's role as a protector, a force that could tip the scales toward justice and peace. And so, the legend of the Deathworlders grew. They were warriors shaped by hardship, tempered by courage, and bound by a fierce loyalty to protect. When the galaxy calls for help, humanity answers with fire and fury. The stars ahead gleamed with promise. A new chapter had begun.